federal judge in San Francisco ruled that Trump's troop deployment to LA was illegal, breaching the Posse Comitatus Act. However, Trump still says he'll send federal law enforcement into Chicago and Baltimore to tackle crime, despite firm opposition from local leaders who call it unnecessary and politically motivated. So a judge today says, hey, illegal. And the same day Trump says, and we're going into Baltimore and Chicago. What the heck?
You surprised?
I'm not surprised, but like...
When has Trump ever given any credence to federal court rulings, unless they're in his favor?
So is that court ruling... So in my mind, that court ruling means nothing.
Let me explain what the Posse Comitatus law is. Do you know?
No.
It's a law passed right around the Civil War time, which prohibited the use of federal troops for domestic law enforcement, except in extraordinary circumstances like invoking the Insurrection Act, which Trump has not done. And this judge said, look, the act is clear. You cannot use federal forces, National Guard, federal troops, for local law enforcement unless you invoke the insurrection. He said, this isn't a close call. This is crystal clear that you're violating the law. However, this is just a district judge. What happens after a district judge makes a ruling?
It goes up the ladder, I guess.
Goes up the ladder. So the ruling is stayed.
Well, I thought it was a federal judge.
It's a federal district court judge.
District court, gotcha.
Yeah. So it goes next to, it's the Ninth Circuit, goes next to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a pretty liberal court. And then where does it go from there, Sam?
The Supreme Court.
And what do you think is likely to happen there?
You really think they're going to let him off the hook for this?
I don't know. They let him off the hook with everything.
LA, they might let him off the hook because, you know, maybe there's some argument that the federal, the ICE agents, the federal agents were maybe being threatened or attacked, whatever it might be, right? But Baltimore and Chicago and D.C.
Well, D.C. he's got a stronger case. The federal government.
But Chicago and Baltimore seem totally illegal to me.
Yeah, and Baltimore does have a high crime rate. Chicago doesn't. Chicago's 29th, 92nd in violent crime. You know, there are certain hot spots in Chicago that people focus on.
But isn't the whole point of the Posse Comitatus Act that you can't just send places because there's high crime?
And you know why we had that act? To keep presidents from becoming tyrants, right? That was one of the major concerns of the framers. The framers were most concerned because they had given so much power to the president, head of the executive branch, commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And there was a lot of debate about that. That was not just something that sailed through. They were very worried that a president could use that power to become a dictator after they had just fought a revolution to overturn a tyrant, George III. And so later on, the Posse Comitatus Act was designed to further the protections against a president using the military, which throughout history has been a tool of tyrants, to become a dictator, to rule over the country. It's no light thing to violate that law. It's not a technical violation.
Right, but I guess the issue is, you know, you and a lot of people you hear talking about Trump and all his transgressions is, I hear this a lot. Well, the courts are going to help rein him in. Okay, so this court ruled that what he did in L.A. was illegal. Certainly, you have to believe that the Posse Comitatus Act would also apply to Chicago and Baltimore.
Even more so.
Right, even more so, but he's doing it anyways. And then you say, well... And then it's like, okay, so the courts aren't curbing him, and you say that once he gets to the Supreme Court, they're going to let him do whatever he wants anyways.
I didn't say that. I said, you know, I'm dubious. I'm not making a prediction what the Supreme Court is going to do, but I'm dubious whether they'll rein him in. But right now, in fact, the problem is the district court, federal district court ruling is on hold until the Court of Appeals can rule. So he does have this interim period where he could still do what he wants without violating that particular order. But you know, he'll be sued in those jurisdictions as well.
It feels like we're back in a debate that we have a lot. It's like, there seems like there's absolutely nothing that we can do about this. It's like, all right, federal judges are saying this is illegal, and then in the same day he's saying he's going to Chicago and Baltimore.
Yes.
It's yeah.
You've heard me many times refer to what James Madison said, the architect of our Constitution, the architect of the separation and division of powers to prevent tyranny. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's the essence of what he said, that you can put down all the protections you want to preserve your freedom. But in the end, none of it is worth anything if we don't have virtue.
We definitely don't have virtue. So where are we left?
Well, it's a big problem.
And a big issue, yeah.
You know what one of the finest, most democratic, most humane constitutions in the history of the world was, Sam?
No.
The Soviet Constitution. If you just read the Soviet Constitution, you would think this place is a utopia. It's a paragon of human rights and democracy. And, of course, we know Stalin and Beria and their henchmen had no humanity, no virtue whatsoever. And what was written in the Soviet Constitution has no meaning. We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
We're not?
But no, we're not there yet.
I mean, he's like, again, L.A., maybe you could argue. D.C., he has a lot of authority. But Chicago and Baltimore seem like if there's going to be federal troops put into those cities, it feels like we're there.
No, we're not the Soviet Union. We don't have a gulag yet.
Right, we're not the gulag. But
we're not the gulag. We're not the Holocaust. You know,
of course,
I don't want to make those comparisons.
That's not what I meant. I guess I'm not saying we are now the Soviet Union. We are now Nazi Germany. But I'm saying we are pretty close to an authoritarian state if you can just have the president send in the military to whatever city he wants for whatever reason he wants.
It's very frightening, and I guess we'll have to see what the Supreme Court does. This may be a step too far, even for the Supreme Court. It's one thing to give the president immunity. It's another thing to sanction firings, right, or, you know, the dismantling of agencies. It's quite another thing to sanction the use of the military for domestic law enforcement. That may be a step too far, maybe at least for 5 justices. I would say the 3 liberals, maybe Roberts and Coney Barrett.
Okay.
But I'm not making any predictions.
Right. And in the meantime, while we wait for them,
Chicago. We'll see if he does that. You know, Pritzker and the mayor of Chicago have stoutly resisted what Trump is going to do. By the way, there is a long history of the use of the military for domestic law enforcement. This isn't something new, but usually it was not in the context of routine policing. Typically, it was in the context of a riot, an uprising, like the massacre in Elaine, or...
Elaine, where's that?
In Arkansas, 1919. Nobody knows about it. Well, that's another book.
Okay.
Or mostly for strikes, starting with the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. And the federal government, time and again, used the military to intervene. Do you think it was on behalf of the strikers, Sam?
No.
No, it was 100% on behalf of the corporate or business interests. But that's a little different. It wasn't for routine law enforcement. One could argue, you know, this was an emergency, it was a crisis, you know, Pinkertons and strikers and sheriff's deputies shooting it out. But let's not pretend that there isn't a history of, I think, abusing the military on behalf of the rich and the powerful. And, of course, the whole history of policing, right up to the present, has been very much one of social control. If you look at the history of policing, it's designed to fight crime, but its primary purpose really has been to keep checks on the dangerous classes, immigrants, racial minorities, particularly black people, vagrants, homeless people, people in poverty. That's where policing takes place. Thanks for watching our video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.